we talk about ethically sourced food and ethically sourced ingredients and that nose to tail and paddock to plate movement. But to me, I've struggled with that because unless you're fully ethical, and that means making sure your worker is respected and paid a correct wage and getting meal breaks when they should, then your restaurant would then be unethical.
This week on Dirty Linen, we are talking about representation in the hospitality industry. Who gets to have the conversations on behalf of the workers, the owners, and everybody who is involved in getting food onto the table of Australian diners? Today, we are chatting to James Consiglio. He is a member organiser with United Workers Union, and I'm finding him somewhere quite warm and steamy today. Welcome to the podcast, James.
Hey, Dani, how are you?
Really good. Tell me where you are right now.
I'm currently in the beautiful Whitsundays up in far north Queensland.
Right. And so as well as working with the union, or as part of your work with the union, you're a chef, aren't you? So tell us what you've gone up there to do.
Yeah, so I've worked 10 years in the industry as a chef. I did my apprenticeship quite young, and I've come up here just to do some yacht work, just kind of live the lifestyle.
Yeah, great. So you've spent lockdown in Melbourne and now found your way to the north as you've been able to travel and seek work. Is that what's happened?
Yeah, so I was working up here pre-COVID, and then obviously the devastation of COVID had a major impact in the Whitsundays. So I wasn't able to work. And then with borders closing, I wasn't able to come back up. But I'm here now, and yeah.
So what's it like cooking on yachts? What's the scene?
It's beautiful. It's a really different pace to what you would get in a commercial kitchen in the middle of Melbourne. You have a clientele. Clientele's always different, so you're able to really kind of bespoke an experience, and you're able to create memories for a lot of different guests, and to me that's really exciting. That's what I love about my job.
Okay. And do you hop from yacht to yacht, or is it sort of like you're the guy on a particular yacht and people come and go from there?
I work for about 5 different yachts, and kind of just in rotation.
Okay. So when I save up and decide I want a yachting holiday in the Whitsundays, do I get to sort of have a chat to you and say, well, we love this, and my husband hates oysters, but I love prawns, and we get to have that chat, and then you sort it all out. Is that how it works?
Yeah. So we get a briefing of the client. I've had clients that just want chicken tenders and potato chips, and and then I've had the other extent where clients want beluga caviar and that really opulent, gorgeous food.
Wow, it must be so interesting where you just don't know what you're going to be cooking from week to week. What's your sort of favourite type of client?
My favorite kind of client is the client that I could probably I see myself and my family kind of being like, they've saved up for this holiday, they want to make it a beautiful experience, they want to create a memory, they're probably coming for a 50th birthday or a wedding renewal vows, or those kind of moments where families can come together and celebrate. That's my big thing. That's what I love.
Yeah, that must be so nice. Then you can be part of that magical experience and creating those memories for them. Well, it's so good to be able to chat to you about this sort of stuff, because when I last spoke to you, it was when you were in Melbourne in lockdown, and we were chatting on the phone, but there were these beeping machines in the background.
Yeah.
So just to let the listeners know what that where that part of the pandemic found you.
So right on the start of, I guess, our stage 4 lockdown, I found myself in a hospital having spinal surgery, which wasn't great, but it was a great time to have it, I guess.
And what had led you to needing that surgery?
So it was a skiing accident that I'd done 4 years ago. That I had a disc that wasn't kind of aligned anymore. And then obviously with the nature of our industry, I never had the time to actually stop and actually have the surgery. I couldn't take 12 weeks out of my life to so I would just have quick fixes with acupuncture and dry needling and get back to work. And yeah, so that it's another issue in itself, but yeah.
So, James, tell me about your work with the union. How did that all come about?
So I'm a founding member of Hospo Voice, going on 3 years now, and that came from me having my own really bad experiences in the industry, and seeing that there's a need for change, and myself wanting to make change for our industry and for workers that are coming through our industry. Um,
Okay. So, Hospo Voice recently, I guess, merged with United Workers Union. Is that the right way to describe it?
so we were, I guess, created by United Voice, and then 12 months ago, United Voice and National Workers Union merged.
Okay. And, as you've sort of grown up and, started voting and all that sort of stuff, did you consider yourself a political person? I mean, was the world of unions a world that you were familiar with or had ever seen yourself being part of?
I don't think it was ever something. I grew up in a very strong CFMEU family.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
my father was a CFMEU member, so it was always, and coming from a Victorian, it's something we're kind of brought up with. We're a very uh, unionised state. We're very strong in our belief. So I I guess I never saw it for my industry in the time that is now, or the time it took for it to change our industry so rapidly.
Yeah, okay. Because I guess, the first time that I heard of Hospo Voice was probably, I guess, early in that 3-year history. And you started to hear about it in terms of action around underpayments. Uh, so is that the sort of, had you experienced that from places that you worked? Was that the sort of focus that took you and prompted you to be one of the founding members?
Yeah, that was a big part of it, was the wage theft campaign. But our initial campaign for Hospo Voice was a campaign called Respect is the Rule, and that was tackling gendered violence and sexual harassment in our industry, and eliminating and making getting the employer and the employees to sign a pledge and really open up that conversation. And for me, that's what enticed me to the union, because as a apprentice chef working in the kitchens of Melbourne, and as a brother with three younger sisters, I would see how chefs kind of degraded, some chefs, sorry, degraded women and front of house workers. And that's not something I wanted to be a part of. And that's not something that I really felt comfortable with. But I was never in a position to say anything or stand up as a voice.
Mm. I suppose, the classic thing about unions is that when people are together, they're stronger. And I suppose it's hard for one person to have a voice, but the more of you that are sort of aligned, the easier it is to speak up. Is that how you felt?
Definitely. And it's about that collective power. One person can spark an idea, but it takes a team to make a change. And until we we've seen it with our members at the moment, and a lot of our industry in Victoria is, people are ready for the change. People want to make change, and this is how they're going about it.
So how many members do you have in the hospitality?
In the thousands. So this year, during the pandemic, we launched as a national union. So we're now Australia wide. So that really opened up a lot of different workers, and gave a lot of different workers from all over the country a voice and this empowerment that they wouldn't once had, that I didn't once have.
Mm. And what's the response been from employers? Because I mean, I think probably the first things that I heard about hospo voice was from restaurateurs, and I'm sure it doesn't come as a massive surprise to you if I say that it was quite there was quite a lot of muttering and grumbling. Like, people weren't really happy to hear about workers organising in this way, as much as people could say, well, I guess there were lots of different conversations. Some people would be saying, look, we know the industry needs to change. Other people would be saying, look, this is just how it is. And I suppose I'm talking more about wages than I am about that sort of harassment that you're speaking about. I mean, what sort of conversations have you had with employers, and what's the tone of those conversations? Is it very adversarial, or is there a willingness to sort of meet at the table?
Look, I believe that a employer is. We've had some quite, I guess, strong cases and strong campaigns around George Coulombaris and Neil Perry and these, for want of a better, like, for a term, celebrity chefs. And they're the ones that have been ripping off workers, and their workers are standing up, and they're the people that we get negativity from because they are doing wrong by workers. Yet we have so many other workers and so many other employers that are so passionate about their workers knowing their rights and getting paid a fair wage that that's what uh, that's the good I see in the union. And we have a website called Fair Play, which workers can anonymously uh, voice their working conditions and voice that they're not being paid right, or they're being paid at a minimum wage, and exploited, which really shouldn't happen in 2020.
Yeah. So have you left workplaces because the employers sort of really weren't coming to the table?
Look, I've left workplaces because I've been underpaid. I've been underpaid, and they're not willing to. They're so blatant about not acknowledging it. So one of the places I was working at, I was underpaid in excess of $22,000, and there was points where HR were so adamant that they were going to get away with it that the only option for me was to go to Fair Work and to go through that process of fighting for. I was working in excess of 70 hours a week and getting paid for 50, 40. Um, so for me, for my own, to kind of, for my own, I deserve it. I work for it.
Mm.
Yeah.
And you didn't feel you were in a position to say, oh, look, I'm going home now because I'm only being paid for these hours. It was more that, was it that there was such a strong culture of doing those hours, and then you sort of had to work the payout later, or what happened?
I think there's a few issues with around wage theft. And for me personally, it was that I I guess I didn't notice it until I kind of stopped and had a look and saw my pay slips. When I was actually receiving them, I wasn't receiving pay slips at the time. And that's a major flaw in our industry, is that some workers don't receive pay slips, but also the casualisation and the transient nature of our industry means that workers uh, don't feel like they can have an opinion, because what the employer will do will just go and fire them, and they can, because of how not. I hate the word irreplaceable, and it's not. It's more. There's no laws until we campaigned and fought for wage theft in Victoria and Queensland now. Um, there was nothing to protect a worker. There was no accountability from the employer that they had to keep that worker on. And a lot of workers got fired because they spoke up and fought for their rights.
Mm. You'd have to imagine that at the moment, when it it's an employees market. Restaurants are desperate for chefs at the moment, and front of house workers. Do you think that changes the landscape?
I've had conversations with a lot of really good employers and a lot of people in the industry in Victoria and also in Sydney, and the conversation and how workers are demanding that get signed onto part time and get signed and have a contract and have secure work. Um, for me, as a union member and someone who's an advocate for change, that is a really good thing that workers are demanding this off their own bat. It it will be it's going to be tough, and there won't be a quick fix to it. I think employers need to really work with their workers and really kind of um, get systems in place where they can put workers onto secure and tight contracts, because then if we have another lockdown or we have another case of a pandemic and our industry closes again, then these workers are going to be covered, and they're not going to have to go to soup kitchens for food, and they're not going to have to like give up so much just to live, which I think, and I know that's something you know very well, is how devastating the heartbreak was of seeing these workers who put food on tables for so many people then had to go and beg and like I don't sorry, I'm getting quite emotional, just reach out for support when there's no need for that in 2020. They should be in secure work. They should have been protected by our government and by our employers.
Well, yeah, look, I guess there's a couple of things that sort of covered by what you're talking about. I mean, there's the issues with the temporary visa holders, and I know that your union did a lot of work to support those people. And yeah, they were the people that I was, trying to shine a light on and assist as well. I think that even if those people were on permanent part-time or full-time employment, that still wouldn't have helped with the way that JobKeeper and JobSeeker were structured. But the way that JobKeeper particularly was structured meant that people who'd been employed as a casual for less than a year weren't covered, whereas permanent part-time and full-time workers, if they'd been employed at the beginning of March, they were able to be assisted. So I guess what you're saying is that if workers now have the confidence to not just take on a casual position, but to ask to be employed with a permanent position, that they're more likely to be covered by any future government schemes that come in if we are so unfortunate as to go through another lockdown. But I suppose it's like, it could be any scenario that comes in, isn't it? There are vastly more protections and well, different conditions. And for some people, it's a better conditions if they are employed in a part-time or full-time position. I mean, it's definitely a space that, there's a lot of discussion around. I mean, the Victorian government's proposed this scheme whereby workers in those frontline industries, including hospitality, who are casual, are there's a pilot scheme to give those people sick leave and carers leave. Is that something that was on your radar, or did that sort of spring out from from around the side, just through Victorian government and perhaps other unions agitating for it?
Look, I think it's something that the union movement has always pushed for and has always asked the government to put in place. We're very lucky in Victoria that we've got a amazing government that do have workers' intentions and the best intentions for workers at the forefront.
Was this pilot scheme for casual workers something that you had been fighting for, or it was on your radar?
Definitely, definitely. We've been fighting for secure work and secure jobs um, for since the start, and that's something we've found. We've done a lot of surveying of our members and the wider hospitality industry, and we came up with 4 key points in our industry that we wanted to make change. And one of those is having secure work. So it will be something that we will continue to fight for and continue to um, collectivize and work towards for a nation, for Australia and every worker in Australia.
So secure work is one of the four pillars that you're fighting for. What are the other three?
So we've got safe and respectful workplaces, which is creating, firstly, obviously what it says, a safe OH&S regulated industry, and also having that respect that I guess a lot of our industry um, is subject to abuse, and not just from employers, but also from customers and uh, guests that dine in. So making sure that workers feel they're respected. We've got another one which is tackling wage theft, and the last one is migrant workers and supporting them in every way we can.
Mm. Well, there's a study that recently came out showing that job ads in languages other than English routinely were advertised for under the award. So, do you have a sort of outreach to culturally, linguistically diverse communities to sort of try to get in and explain to people what their rights are?
Definitely. I myself speak 8 languages, so I'm happy to speak to any member that uh, needs representation in a language. And we work very closely with Trades Hall, who have I guess, a team specifically designed to feed into those communities.
James, I'm sorry. I just have to say, like, did you say you speak 8 languages?
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
what are they, and how is this possible?
Um, I just had a knack for them. I speak Japanese, Chinese, English, Maltese, Arabic, Italian, French, and there's a couple of others. Sign language is a major one that I find really helpful, but it's yeah.
Wow, that is amazing. So, have you just learnt those off your own back, or have you been a secret linguistics student all the way along?
um, I've learnt them off my back, but I've also learnt them off a necessity to communicate with people in my kitchen, and workers that obviously our um, dishes and there's all different kind of cultures that come through our industry, and I really want to be able to connect with them to create a really open community communication and feel comfortable. Like I know for myself, and when I go to another country, um, being able to speak English is a bonus, but being able to communicate and respect that person in their language is to me a beautiful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's incredible. Wow. So yeah, sorry, I think I cut you off, but I really just am really amazed and impressed by that. And it is such an international industry. So it's yeah, I'm sure it makes a massive difference to be able to communicate with people in their own language. It's interesting, like you say, you've got thousands of members, and it's growing all the time. It's Australia is less unionised now than it probably has been for the last century. What do you think it is that means that that unions are expanding in hospitality, whereas in many industries they're declining?
Um, for us, for our industry, I guess it is that workers have had enough. We work in a hard enough industry as it is, with it. We don't need to be going home and worrying about if we're being paid the correct wage, or if our boss is ripping us off, or um, workers going home feeling intimidated because a customer has touched them or made a slur to them. So that empowerment and that kind of fight that we have as workers, and that kind of drive we have as hospitality workers, um, I guess, is a really good thing for our union movement. Um, but also, we have our I guess our model of Hospo Voice is we it's $9.99 a month, and we've been able to create a digital union that redefine the union. We've been the union that has been able to adapt to this pandemic quite quickly because it's what we've been doing for 3 years. We've been having Zoom calls. We've been having online tools to empower our workers, and with that, this year we've launched an app called Mobilize, which is a really cool app where workers can go on and check their pay rates, and they can ask. We've got a integrated AI kind of bot where workers can find out about their rights. They might be standing in the cool room or on a milk crate in the laneway, or and they can ask this bot, how much should I be paid? What are my rights around paid sick leave? And being able to unionize and create a model that fits for our industry is really revolutionary in our movement.
Yeah, so I guess it's easier to build something for the digital space when it's new, and I guess there's a lot of young people that are in it as well. It doesn't have that sort of rusted on vibe of perhaps the CFMEU or some of those more traditional unions. Although there still have been, some, I guess, traditional actions like marches and protests, that sort of thing. So I guess that's a more traditional type of activism. I guess, I think some restaurateurs have this sense that Hospo Voice is against restaurants, that it's that their restaurants just are a certain way, and Hospo Voice is just sort of undermining the way that things are to the detriment of the industry. What would you say to people expressing that view?
That they're completely wrong. Hospo Voice is member led. It's led by members that work in the industry, that work for these employers, that if they were doing right by their worker, then I guess they wouldn't be scared. They wouldn't be scared that we'll turn up with a megaphone, because we're not afraid of doing that. And we've had some really, really good actions where it's gotten the general public to really question. We talk about ethically sourced food and ethically sourced ingredients and that nose to tail and paddock to plate movement. But to me, I've struggled with that, because unless you're fully ethical, and that means making sure your worker is respected and paid a correct wage and getting meal breaks when they should, then that's your restaurant would then be unethical, if your worker's not getting that. So to me, those restaurateurs that are worried obviously have a reason to be worried, because they're not doing right by their workers.
And what would you say to people who say, "Oh, the awards outdated. It's too complicated. People, the rates are wrong. Like it's ridiculous." What would you say? What would you say to those people?
Look, myself as a worker, I've discovered the award a lot easier to navigate nowadays, because I've had time to stop and look at it. And as a worker, it is hard for us, but restaurateurs pay money and pay a wage to HRs and accountants and people who should know how to look up an award, or MYOB, I believe, has the award already written into it. So there is really no excuse for a um, employer to be ripping off workers, if they unless they set out to do that. And for me personally, that means they cut my hours. They docked my pay slip from 70 hours to 50. They made manual changes. So they set out from the start to uh, exploit me.
So, what about these? I guess, old school chefs who are just like, well, I came up doing 70 hours and that's just how it is. And I don't regret a second of it because I learned a lot and it's just how it was. What's your response to that?
My personal response as someone who trained under those kinds of chefs is I don't do it because it's an easy job. I I I would hate it if it was boring and mundane and it was easy, but there's got to be give and take. We have to have a work life balance. We can't be doing 70-hour weeks and not having meal breaks and not having um, correct wages paid to us. We need to have, I guess, solid guidelines in our industry nowadays around what is acceptable for a chef to work. And I think younger chefs, possibly not my generation, but maybe the generation under me, are are seeing that, and there is that kind of change from the old, like, grumpy old chef from the 70s that you would see at a training school with the big white hat, to like chefs now that come in and actually care about their workers. And to me that oh sorry, like that just makes a better work environment and a better condition. You're going to get more out of your workers if they're well rested and respected and they want to be there. And I don't think just wanting to be a chef or just wanting to work in hospitality is enough anymore.
So you've spoken very favourably about the Victorian government and their approach to workers. That's a Labor government, and federally we've got a Liberal government who perhaps has a bit of a different slant on industrial relations. There are some proposed IR law changes that will remove the better off overall test in some circumstances, which means that employees are able to make a deal with the employer that is actually worse for them. And there's also a provision in which some workers can be asked to work extra hours without penalty rates. Is this the next battle for United Workers?
It's the next battle for all unions. These I guess conditions that the Liberal government are putting onto us and the Scott Morrison government are putting onto us as workers is not fair, and it's not. I guess it's also been a little bit misinformed on how a worker is going to be exploited. They've come out and said this will be good for every worker when it's not. It's not going to be.
Um, can you ever imagine yourself being an employer one day, like owning a business?
Definitely, definitely, and I can't wait for that day. I've looked throughout this year. At opening my own business. I was going to do it in March, and I'm somewhat thankful I didn't. Um,
You might have dodged a bullet there.
yeah, just a little bit. But I would love to, and I would love to create a restaurant and I guess, product that people want to come to because they know that they're going to get really lovely food and really lovely surfers, and also that their workers want to be part of that environment and want to be there.
Mm, yeah, right. So, do you anticipate that you'll need to charge higher prices than some businesses do simply because you want to have that, I guess, that triple bottom line sort of approach to the business?
No, God no, I don't. No, I don't. I think
Okay.
I think um, that it could be tough for businesses, but it doesn't. That's not a justifiable reason to exploit workers. Um, these chefs that we've gone after have millions and millions of dollars, and a lot of employers in that kind of exploitation realm have the fancy Rolexes and have the cars, but to me that just doesn't. That's not what I don't want to make money from the industry. I want to be a part of that industry and be a part of change.
Do you see a positive future for the industry?
Definitely, definitely. And I think as Hospo Voices, a union continues to grow and evolve, and we continue to have stronger or building stronger presences in the East Coast and West Coast, that the industry and the conversation will change. We've seen over the 3 years the conversation changing in a Facebook group called the Melbourne Bartender Exchange, where 3 years ago someone would advertise for a bartender and that would be $14.50 an hour, cash in hand. Yet now we get workers that are saying award rates, and these are all your conditions, and they're good conditions. And we've seen that conversation change from us promoting and holding bosses and employers accountable, but also workers wanting to stand up and create an industry that they want to be a part of. And
yeah, well, that must be, I guess really satisfying to see that change occur.
It's really empowering. It goes to show that workers want to change the industry
because they want to be part of it.
Because they want to be part of it, and that employers also want to be a part of it.
All right, James. Well, it's so interesting to get your perspective, and to have the opportunity to learn more about how you started doing what you're doing and where you think it's going. But what I would love to find out is if you know where you're going on your first yacht trip in this new stint in the Whitsundays.
I'm actually about to, in about 15 minutes, jump on a yacht across to Hamilton Island, and then from there I'll be going to the Outer Reef in the Great Barrier Reef for 3 days, which will be beautiful.
Amazing. And do you know what kind of clients you've got? Like what kind of food they want?
I do. I've got a really lovely family from Sydney. They're just hilarious. One of the little girl, she's obsessed with a TV show called Bluey, and I personally am obsessed with Bluey. How can you not be? And
so cute, yeah.
Yeah. She wants a Bluey cupcake, so I'm going to do a whole menu for her. And I love that fun and that creativity and being able to bespoke and really be in that for them. So I can't wait.
Yeah. Great. Well, we better let you go so you can hop on the yacht. We don't want the little girl to miss out on her Bluey banquet. But yeah, thanks, James. It's really great to have you on Dirty Linen, and have a good time out there on the water. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Dani.
This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about. We spend a week thrashing around each issue, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinen@deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.
This is a Deep in the Weeds production.